The scream came before I even reached the top of the stairs. I dropped the laundry basket and ran, my heart slamming against my ribs, my bare feet slapping against the cold marble floor of the Cross mansion. It was only my third day working there, and already I was learning that nothing in this house happened quietly. I burst into the nursery to find little Lily standing on a chair, reaching for a snow globe on a shelf that was clearly too high for her. She wobbled, and I lunged across the room, catching her, just as the chair tipped backward. We landed together on the soft rug, and she burst into giggles instead of tears, wrapping her small arms around my neck. "Again," she said. "Do it again." I laughed, breathless, my pulse still hammering. "Not today, little one. You nearly gave me a heart attack." That was when I heard the slow clap from the doorway. I looked up to see Vanessa Hale leaning against the frame, dressed in a cream silk dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. Her lips were curved into a smile that did not reach her eyes. "How impressive," she said. "The nanny actually caught the child. Should we throw a parade?" I stood, brushing off my skirt, keeping Lily close to my side. "She's fine. That's what matters." "Is it?" Vanessa stepped into the room, her heels clicking against the floor like a countdown. "Because from where I was standing, it looked like you weren't watching her at all. What exactly am I paying you for?" I bit back the first response that came to mind. She wasn't paying me for anything. Damien Cross was. But I had learned quickly, in just 3 days, that correcting Vanessa Hale in front of witnesses was not a battle worth fighting yet. "I'll be more careful," I said instead. Vanessa's eyes swept over me, from my flushed cheeks to my curves that the plain gray dress could not fully hide, and something flickered across her face. Not concern. Something closer to disgust laced with calculation. "See that you are," she said, turning on her heel. "Damien doesn't tolerate carelessness, and neither do I." She left the room in a cloud of expensive perfume, and I finally let myself breathe. Lily tugged at my sleeve. "Don't listen to her," the little girl whispered, as if she were the adult comforting the child, instead of the other way around. "She's mean to everyone." "Is she your father's friend?" I asked carefully, kneeling down to her level. Lily made a face. "She wants to marry him, but I don't like her. She pinched my arm once when nobody was looking." I filed that piece of information away, my stomach tightening. I had taken this job because I needed it desperately, because my last position had ended with an unpaid final month, and a landlord who did not care about my excuses. The pay here was more than I had ever been offered, and the agency had promised me a stable household with a good family. Nobody had mentioned that the family included a woman who looked at me like I was something she wanted to scrape off her shoe, and a man whose name people said in hushed voices, as if speaking it too loudly might summon trouble. I had seen Damien Cross only twice since I arrived, once from a distance, crossing the courtyard in a dark coat, flanked by 2 men who moved like shadows around him, and once up close, in the study, when he had interviewed me himself, instead of leaving it entirely to his staff. I remembered the way his eyes had studied me, not with the same hunger Vanessa's gaze carried when she looked at other women as competition, but with something quieter, assessment, like he was trying to decide if I could be trusted with the most important thing in his life. "Is my father coming home tonight?" Lily asked, pulling me back to the present. "I don't know, sweetheart. Should we go find out?" She nodded eagerly, and I took her small hand in mine, leading her out of the nursery and down the wide staircase. The Cross Mansion was the largest house I had ever set foot in, with high ceilings and long hallways that seemed to swallow sound. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, watching us pass with painted eyes. We found Mrs. Whitfield, the housekeeper, in the kitchen, overseeing the preparation of dinner. She was a stout woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. "There you are," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I heard the commotion upstairs. Everything all right?" Lily gave me a scare, but she's fine, I said. "Is Mr. Cross expected home soon?" Mrs. Whitfield's expression shifted, just slightly, a flicker of caution crossing her weathered face. "He should be back before dinner. Why do you ask?" I hesitated, unsure how much to say. Miss Hale was in the nursery. She wasn't pleased with how things looked. Mrs. Whitfield's mouth pressed into a thin line. She glanced around the kitchen, as if checking for unwanted ears, then lowered her voice. Let me give you some advice, dear, since you're new here. Miss Hale has been trying to secure her place in this house for over a year now. She sees every member of staff as either useful to her or a threat. You, unfortunately, might be seen as the second kind. Why would I be a threat? I'm just the nanny. Because Lily adores you already, and that child does not warm up to strangers easily, Mrs. Whitfield said, and because Mr. Cross noticed that himself, this morning, when he watched you two in the garden. My cheeks warmed unexpectedly. I didn't realize he was watching. He watches everything in this house. It's how he's stayed alive this long. She said it plainly, without drama, the way someone might mention the weather. Now, go wash up. Dinner will be ready soon, and I imagine Miss Hale will be joining tonight, given how she's already made her rounds. I led Lily upstairs to freshen her before dinner, my mind spinning with everything Mrs. Whitfield had said. I had known, vaguely, before accepting this position, that the Cross family had a certain reputation. People spoke of Damien Cross the way they spoke of storms, something to be respected and feared, and never underestimated. I had told myself it did not matter, that I would simply care for his daughter and stay out of everything else. But staying out of everything else was proving harder than I had imagined, especially with Vanessa Hale circling the house like a hawk that had already decided I was prey. Before heading down, I paused in front of the small mirror in my room, smoothing my simple dress, trying to steady the nervous flutter in my chest. I told myself firmly that I had nothing to prove to anyone in that dining room, that my only responsibility was to Lily and her well-being. Yet some quiet part of me could not stop wondering what Damien Cross would think when he looked at me again, whether the brief assessment from our interview had shifted into something else entirely. I shook the thought away, annoyed with myself for even entertaining it. I was the nanny. Nothing more, nothing less. And I intended to keep it that way regardless of what Vanessa Hale seemed to fear. By the time Lily and I made our way down to the dining room, the long table was set with more silverware than I had ever seen in one place. Vanessa was already seated, her dress changed into something even more elaborate, dark red and cut to draw every eye toward her. She smiled when she saw me enter with Lily, but it was the same smile as before, sharp beneath the surface. There's the little troublemaker, Vanessa said, though her eyes were fixed on me, not the child. I hope her nanny has learned to keep a closer eye on her. I said nothing, guiding Lily to her seat, my jaw tight. The door opened, and the temperature of the room seemed to change. Damien Cross walked in, still wearing his dark coat, his expression unreadable, the kind of calm that made you nervous rather than reassured. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back, and eyes the color of storm clouds before rain. Every movement he made was deliberate, controlled, like a man who had learned long ago that hesitation could cost him everything. "Papa," Lily said, brightening instantly, half rising from her chair. His entire face softened when he looked at her. "Stay seated, little bird. I'm here." He took his place at the head of the table, his gaze sweeping the room once, briefly landing on me before moving on. I felt that single glance more than I wanted to admit, a strange warmth blooming in my chest that I quickly told myself to ignore. I was the nanny, nothing more. Vanessa leaned toward him the moment he sat down. "Darling, you should know there was an incident earlier. Lily was nearly hurt because the new nanny wasn't paying attention." I stiffened. Damien's eyes moved to me, steady and searching. "Is that true?" he asked, his voice low, giving nothing away. My throat felt tight, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. Lily climbed on a chair to reach a shelf. I caught her before she fell. She wasn't hurt at all. "She caught her," Lily added helpfully. Food already forgotten in favor of the conversation. "She's really fast, Papa." A faint, almost invisible shift crossed Damien's features, something close to approval. He looked back at Vanessa. "It sounds like the situation was handled well." Vanessa's smile faltered for just a moment, before she recovered it, smooth as glass. "Of course. I only meant to mention it out of concern for Lily's safety." "Noted," Damien said simply, and turned his attention to his daughter, asking about her day. listening with a focus that surprised me from a man with his reputation. I ate quietly, aware of Vanessa's occasional glances in my direction, each one colder than the last. She had expected Damien to reprimand me, perhaps even dismiss me on the spot, and his refusal to do so had clearly rattled her more than she wanted to show. After dinner, as I brought Lily upstairs to prepare her for bed, I passed the study and heard raised voices through the partially closed door. I slowed my steps, unable to help myself. "You cannot keep undermining every member of my staff who doesn't bow to you," Damien said, his voice sharp now, none of the careful control from dinner remaining. "I am simply looking out for your daughter," Vanessa replied, her tone shifting instantly to something softer, more wounded. "Why does that upset you?" "Because I saw exactly what happened in the nursery, on the security feed, before you arrived downstairs to tell your version," Damien said. "The nanny protected Lily. That's the truth. Don't twist it again." Silence followed, heavy and tense. I hurried away before either of them noticed me lingering, my heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with fear this time. He had checked the security feed. He had seen the truth before Vanessa ever opened her mouth. Somehow, that single fact settled something anxious in my chest, even as it stirred something else entirely, something I had no business feeling toward the man who signed my paycheck. I tucked Lily into bed, listening to her sleepy chatter about her day, about the games we would play tomorrow, about how she wished her father was home more often. When she finally drifted off, I sat by her bed for a long moment, thinking about the storm clouds in Damien Cross's eyes and the ice in Vanessa Hale's smile. I did not know it yet, but that dinner was only the beginning. Vanessa Hale did not forgive easily, and she certainly did not forget. And somewhere beneath the calm surface of the Cross household, a much larger storm was already gathering, one that would pull me directly into its center whether I wanted it or not. As I finally left Lily's room and made my way to my own small quarters at the end of the hall, I passed a window overlooking the courtyard. A car was pulling away, headlights cutting through the darkness, Vanessa's car, leaving earlier than expected. I did not know what had been said after I left the hallway outside the study, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that the peace of tonight would not last. The garden party was Vanessa's idea, though she made sure everyone believed it was in honor of Lily's birthday. Long tables were set beneath white tents, decorated with pale flowers and delicate china. Guests in tailored suits and designer dresses mingled across the lawn, their laughter carrying on the afternoon breeze. I stood near the edge of it all, dressed in the simple green dress Mrs. Whitfield had insisted I wear, instead of my usual uniform, since I would be attending Lily throughout the event. I felt out of place among the glittering guests, but Lily kept pulling me by the hand from one game to another, introducing me proudly to anyone who would listen. "This is Claire," she announced to a group of women sipping champagne near the rose bushes. "She's my best friend." The women smiled politely, though their eyes lingered on me with the same curious assessment I had grown used to since arriving at the mansion. I was neither guest nor servant in their eyes, some strange in-between creature that did not fit cleanly into their world. A group of children ran past us chasing a bright kite that had drifted too low, and Lily laughed, momentarily distracted from the important task of dessert selection. I watched her, grateful for the easy joy children seem to find in even the smallest things, before Vanessa's voice cut through the pleasant moment. Vanessa found us near the dessert table, where Lily was carefully choosing between two different cakes. "Claire," Vanessa said sweetly, loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear, "how lovely that you could join us. Though I do wonder if the uniform would have been more appropriate." A few heads turned. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my voice steady. "Mrs. Whitfield asked me to wear this today." "Of course she did." Vanessa's smile widened, sharp as broken glass. "It's just that some things look better on certain people than others. Don't you think that dress is a bit snug for you?" Laughter rippled through a small cluster of her friends standing nearby. My stomach twisted, humiliation burning through me, but I refused to give her the reaction she wanted. "I think it's comfortable," I said simply. "That's what matters when you're chasing a 5-year-old around a garden." Lily, sensing the tension despite not fully understanding it, tugged my hand. "Claire, can we go see the ponies now?" "Of course, sweetheart." As I turned to lead her away, Vanessa's voice followed, pitched just loud enough to reach us. It's sweet, really, watching the help try so hard to fit in, almost admirable. I pretended not to hear, though every word landed like a stone against my chest. We walked toward the small enclosure where 2 ponies had been brought in for the children's entertainment, and I focused entirely on Lily's delighted squeals as she reached out to pet the closest one's soft nose. "Don't be sad," Lily said suddenly, looking up at me with unexpected wisdom in her young eyes. "She's mean because she's scared." "Scared of what, little one?" "That Papa likes you more than her." I nearly choked on my own breath. "That's not true, sweetheart. Your father barely notices me." Lily just shrugged, returning her attention to the pony, as if she had said something entirely obvious and unremarkable. I spent the next hour keeping Lily entertained, moving from the ponies to a small table where children were decorating cupcakes, trying my best to stay in corners of the party away from Vanessa's orbit. It mostly worked until the moment came for the group photograph. Mrs. Whitfield had arranged for a professional photographer to capture the party, and Damien had finally arrived from whatever business had kept him occupied that morning. He looked different in daylight, dressed less formally than usual, though the same quiet intensity radiated from him regardless of what he wore. "Everyone gather for the photo," the photographer called out, waving guests toward a decorated archway near the garden's center. Lily grabbed my hand immediately. "Claire has to be in it too." "Sweetheart, I don't think that's necessary," I said gently, trying to extract myself from the situation before it could become another opportunity for Vanessa to humiliate me. "No, I want her in it," Lily insisted, her small face set with the same stubbornness I had already learned defined her. Damien, who had been standing nearby, speaking with one of his associates, turned at his daughter's raised voice. "What's the trouble, little bird?" "I want Claire in the picture with us," Lily said. He glanced at me, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. Then she should be in the picture. Vanessa, who had already positioned herself beside Damien for the photograph, stiffened visibly. "Darling, surely the staff don't need to be included in family photographs. It's simply not appropriate." "She's not just staff to me," Lily said, crossing her small arms, and several guests nearby exchanged amused glances at the fierce determination in her voice. Damien's expression remained calm, but there was steel beneath it now. "My daughter has made her wishes clear. Claire will be in the photograph." Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she said nothing further, forcing her practiced smile back into place as I reluctantly moved to stand near the edge of the group, as far from the center as I could manage. The photographer arranged everyone, and I felt intensely aware of Vanessa's gaze burning into the side of my face throughout the entire process. After the photograph, as guests dispersed back into conversation, Vanessa found a moment to corner me near the refreshment table, while Damien was pulled away by an associate for what looked like an urgent conversation. "Let me be very clear," Vanessa said, her voice low and cold now, all pretense of sweetness gone. "Whatever game you think you're playing, it ends today. Damien is mine. This family is mine. You are a temporary employee who will be forgotten the moment I decide you're no longer useful." "I'm not playing any game," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the way my hands trembled slightly at my sides. "I take care of Lily. That's all I'm here for." "Is it?" Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Because it seems to me that a girl like you, with your curves and your sweet smile, might have bigger ambitions than changing diapers and reading bedtime stories." The insult landed exactly where she intended, and I felt my cheeks burn with a mixture of anger and shame. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," Vanessa said. "I know women like you always think they can climb higher than they belong, but men like Damien Cross don't marry the nanny. They use her, if they're bored enough, and then they discard her. Remember that, before you get any foolish ideas." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing there with my fists clenched at my sides, humiliation and fury warring inside me. I excused myself to the edge of the garden, needing a moment away from the crowd to collect myself before Lily noticed anything was wrong. I found a quiet bench beneath a large oak tree, away from the main party, and sat down, pressing my palms against my eyes to keep the threatening tears at bay. I would not cry. I would not let Vanessa Hale see even a hint of how deeply her words had cut. You handled that better than most people would have. I startled, looking up to find Damien standing a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, his expression thoughtful rather than intrusive. You saw that? I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. I saw enough, he said, moving closer, but keeping a respectful distance as he settled onto the other end of the bench. Vanessa can be difficult when she feels threatened. I'm not a threat to her, I said. I'm just the nanny. That's what everyone keeps saying today. A faint, almost amused expression crossed his face, gone as quickly as it appeared. Yet somehow you seem to have earned my daughter's complete devotion in less than a week, which is more than most people manage in months. She's an easy child to love, I said honestly. She's kind and clever and braver than she should be at her age. Something shifted in Damien's expression at that, a flicker of something almost vulnerable. She's had to be brave. Her mother left when she was 2 years old. It's just been the two of us since then, along with whatever staff I could trust to keep her safe. I hadn't known that detail, and it explained so much about the way Lily clung to affection wherever she found it, and the careful, watchful way Damien observed everyone who entered his daughter's orbit. I'm sorry, I said softly. That must have been hard for both of you. It was. He looked out across the garden, toward where guests continued to mingle, oblivious to our conversation beneath the oak tree. I've learned to keep people at a careful distance since then. Trust is expensive in my world, and it gets people hurt when they're not careful with it. And yet you let me into that photograph today, I said, unable to help myself. His gray eyes turned back to me, studying my face with an intensity that made my breath catch. My daughter trusts you completely. That's not something she gives easily. I've learned to trust her instincts about people, even when I don't fully understand my own feelings on the matter. Before I could respond, one of his men approached from across the lawn, his expression urgent despite his measured pace. Sir, we need a moment. It's about the shipment. Damien's entire demeanor shifted instantly, the warmth in his expression replaced by the same controlled intensity I had witnessed the first time I met him. He rose from the bench, straightening his jacket. Duty calls, he said, though something in his tone suggested reluctance to leave our conversation unfinished. Thank you for today, Claire, for handling Vanessa with more grace than she deserved, and for whatever it is you've done to make my daughter so happy. He walked away with his associate before I could respond, leaving me alone, beneath the oak tree, with my thoughts spinning in directions I knew were dangerous to follow. I told myself firmly that whatever strange warmth had passed between us on that bench meant nothing, that men like Damien Cross did not fall for nannies, and that Vanessa's cruel warning still held more truth than I wanted to admit. But as I made my way back toward the party to find Lily, I could not shake the memory of his eyes when he spoke about his daughter's trust, or the way his voice had softened when he thanked me. Something had shifted that afternoon, subtle but undeniable, and I suspected Vanessa Hale had noticed it too, watching from across the lawn with an expression that promised this was far from over. Later that afternoon, while Lily napped under a shaded canopy, I wandered toward the edge of the garden, where a small fountain trickled quietly against the noise of the party. I needed a moment away from the crowd, away from curious eyes, to think about everything that had happened beneath the oak tree. A young man I recognized as one of Damien's associates approached, offering a polite nod before speaking. You handled Miss Hale well earlier. Most people who cross her end up regretting it within the week. I didn't cross her, I said carefully, unsure how much I should say to someone I barely knew. I just did my job. That's usually enough to earn her attention, he said, glancing back toward where Vanessa stood surrounded by admirers near the champagne table. She doesn't like sharing anything she considers hers, even things that were never truly hers to begin with. Mr. Cross, for instance. I said nothing, though the comment settled uneasily in my chest. For what it's worth, he continued, lowering his voice, most of the staff have noticed the way Mr. Cross looks at you. It's not something any of us have seen before, not with anyone Miss Hale has ever considered a rival. Before I could respond, Lily stirred beneath the canopy, calling out for me, and I excused myself gratefully, though his words followed me the rest of the afternoon, stirring both hope and dread in equal measure. The rest of the party passed without further incident, though I caught Vanessa watching me more than once, her expression calculating rather than openly hostile now, as if she were already planning her next move. When the last guests finally departed, and Lily was tucked safely into bed that night, exhausted from a day of cupcakes and ponies, I lay awake in my own small room, replaying the conversation beneath the oak tree over and over in my mind. I did not know then how quickly Vanessa's calculating silence would turn into open war, or how far she was willing to go to remove me from the house entirely. But I knew, with the same certainty that had settled in my bones the night before, that the fragile piece of the Cross household was crumbling, piece by piece, and I had somehow become the fault line running straight through its center. The necklace disappeared on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday morning, everyone in the house believed I had taken it. I woke to the sound of raised voices outside my door, and stumbled out of bed to find Mrs. Whitfield standing in the hallway, her face pale, flanked by two of Damien's security staff. "Claire, we need you to come downstairs," she said, her voice carefully neutral in a way that immediately set off alarm bells in my chest. "What's happened?" I asked, pulling my robe tighter around myself. "Miss Hale's necklace is missing, the diamond one she wore to the gala last month. She says she last saw it in her room 2 nights ago, and this morning it was gone." My stomach dropped. "And you think I took it?" "I don't think anything," Mrs. Whitfield said, though the tightness around her eyes suggested she was choosing her words with great care. "But Miss Hale is insisting the house be searched, starting with staff quarters. Mr. Cross is away until this evening, handling business in the city." Of course he was. Vanessa had waited for the one window when Damien was gone to make her move, and I understood immediately, with sickening clarity, exactly what was happening. My mind raced back through the previous days, searching for any moment Vanessa might have slipped into my room unnoticed, any window of opportunity I had unknowingly given her. I found none, which meant she had planned this with far more care than I had given her credit for. I followed the security staff downstairs to find Vanessa waiting in the main hall, dressed impeccably despite the early hour, her arms crossed and her expression a careful mask of distress that did not quite reach her eyes. "There she is," Vanessa said the moment I appeared. "I want her room searched immediately." "This is ridiculous," I said, my voice shaking despite my attempt to sound calm. "I've never even been in your room, let alone touched your jewelry." "Then you have nothing to worry about," Vanessa said sweetly, "if the search turns up nothing." I had no choice but to agree, standing rigid in the hallway as 2 members of the household staff went through my small room, checking drawers and beneath the mattress, and inside the single suitcase I had brought with me when I arrived. Lily appeared partway through, drawn by the commotion, and I saw her small face crumple with confusion and worry when she realized what was happening. "Claire didn't take anything," Lily insisted, tugging at Mrs. Whitfield's sleeve. "She would never do that." "I know, sweetheart," Mrs. Whitfield murmured, though her eyes remained fixed anxiously on the doorway of my room, waiting for the search to conclude. It took nearly 20 minutes before one of the staff members emerged, holding something wrapped in a handkerchief. My blood turned to ice as he unwrapped it to reveal the missing necklace, diamonds catching the morning light, tucked inside the lining of my only winter coat. "I've never seen that before in my life," I said, my voice breaking, despite my determination to stay composed. "I swear it." "Someone must have planted it there." Vanessa's expression shifted instantly from distress to triumph, though she quickly rearranged her features into something resembling sorrowful disappointment. "I hate to say I suspected as much. It's such a shame. She seemed so sweet." "You did this," I said, turning on her, months of careful restraint finally cracking. "You put it there yourself." "That's a serious accusation," Vanessa said, her voice cold now, all pretense gone. "Perhaps theft isn't the only crime you should be worried about being accused of." Mrs. Whitfield stepped between us, before the confrontation could escalate further, her expression torn between sympathy for me and the practical reality of her position within the household. "We need to wait for Mr. Cross to return before anything further is decided. Claire, I'm sorry, but you'll need to remain in your room until then." Before the door closed on my temporary confinement, I caught sight of Lily standing at the end of the hallway, her small face streaked with tears, straining against Mrs. Whitfield's gentle hold on her shoulder. "Let me talk to her," Lily pleaded. "Please, just for a minute." "Not right now, sweetheart," Mrs. Whitfield murmured, though her own eyes glistened with something close to sympathy. "We need to sort this out properly first." I offered Lily what I hoped was a reassuring smile, though my hands trembled at my sides. "It's going to be all right, I promise." I did not know, in that moment, if the promise was one I could actually keep, but I needed her to believe it, needed some part of the household to remain steady, even as the ground shifted beneath my own feet. I spent the entire day locked away, pacing the small space, my mind racing through every possible explanation, every way I might prove my innocence. Lily came to my door twice, only to be gently turned away by Mrs. Whitfield, and I could hear her small voice through the wood, insisting over and over that I would never do something so terrible. By the time evening fell and I heard the sound of a car pulling into the courtyard below my window, I had convinced myself that my time in the Cross household was over, that I would be dismissed, and likely reported to the authorities for a crime I had never committed, and that whatever fragile connection had begun forming between Damien and myself would end before it had ever truly begun. The knock on my door came less than an hour later. Mrs. Whitfield's voice, gentle but urgent. "Claire, Mr. Cross wants to see you in his study." My legs felt unsteady as I made my way down the long hallway, rehearsing explanations in my mind that all sounded weak and desperate even to my own ears. I pushed open the study door to find Damien standing behind his desk, his jacket discarded, his sleeves rolled up, an expression on his face that I could not immediately read. Vanessa stood near the window, her arms crossed, a satisfied tilt to her chin that told me she believed this conversation would end exactly as she had planned. "Sit down, Claire," Damien said, his voice quiet, but carrying an authority that made me obey without hesitation. "I didn't take the necklace," I said immediately, before he could speak further. "I know how it looks, but I swear to you, I have never even been inside Miss Hale's room." "I know," Damien said simply. The room went silent. Vanessa's confident posture faltered slightly. "Excuse me?" I said, "I know she didn't take it," Damien repeated, turning his gray eyes toward Vanessa now, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Because I had the security footage from the hallway outside Vanessa's room, reviewed the moment I arrived home." He pressed a button on a small device on his desk, and a screen on the wall flickered to life, displaying grainy but unmistakable footage. I watched, my heart pounding, as the recording showed Vanessa herself, late at night 2 days prior, entering my room with something small clutched in her hand, emerging moments later without it. "That's impossible," Vanessa said, though her voice had lost all its earlier confidence. "The footage must be doctored. Someone is trying to frame me. The system logs the timestamp automatically, and it cannot be altered without leaving a trace that my security team would have noticed immediately," Damien said, his voice hardening with every word. "You planted that necklace in Claire's room yourself, then reported it stolen the following morning, timing everything perfectly for the one day I would be away." Vanessa's mask cracked entirely now, fury replacing the careful sorrow she had worn all day. "She's turning you against me. Can't you see what she's doing? She's manipulated Lily, manipulated the staff, and now she's manipulating you too. The only person who has manipulated anyone in this house is you," Damien said, his voice low and dangerous, in a way I had not heard before, a glimpse of the reputation that made grown men speak his name in careful whispers. "I have overlooked a great deal from you over the past year, Vanessa. Your jealousy, your cruelty toward my staff, even your unkindness toward my own daughter on occasions I chose not to address directly. But I will not overlook you attempting to frame an innocent woman for theft in my own home, simply because you cannot bear the thought of my attention shifting anywhere other than to you." "Damien, we're finished," he said, cutting her off with a finality that left no room for negotiation. "Our engagement is over, effective immediately. I want you out of this house by tomorrow morning." Vanessa's face went through a rapid series of emotions, shock and fury, and something that looked almost like desperation. "You cannot be serious. You're choosing her, over me, over everything we've built together?" "I'm choosing honesty over deception," Damien said. "I'm choosing my daughter's happiness over your comfort, and frankly, Vanessa, I should have made this choice a long time ago." She stared at him for a long moment, and then her gaze swung to me, burning with a hatred so intense I felt it like a physical blow. "This isn't over. You'll regret this. Both of you." She stormed from the room, her heels striking against the floor like gunshots, and the front door slammed hard enough that I felt the vibration through the floorboards beneath my feet. Silence settled over the study, thick and heavy, until it was just Damien and myself remaining. "I'm sorry you had to endure that," Damien said, his voice softening as he moved around the desk to stand closer to where I sat. "I should have suspected something like this sooner. Vanessa's jealousy has been building for months, long before you arrived." "Thank you," I said, my voice still unsteady from the day's events, "for believing me, for checking the footage before assuming the worst." "I would never assume the worst about you," he said, and something in the way he said it made my breath catch. "From the moment I interviewed you for this position, I sensed something different about you. Honest, genuine. It's a rare quality in the world I move through, and I wasn't about to dismiss it without proof. Even though everything pointed toward my guilt?" "Especially because everything pointed toward your guilt," he said. "It was too neat, too convenient, arranged perfectly for the one day I would be unavailable to intervene immediately. Vanessa was many things, but she was never particularly subtle when she felt threatened." I let out a shaky breath, some of the day's tension finally beginning to release from my shoulders. I was so afraid, not just of losing this position, but of what it would mean for my future, being accused of something like that. "You have nothing more to fear," Damien said firmly. "Not from Vanessa, not from anyone in this house. I'll make certain of that personally." There was a knock at the study door before I could respond, and Lily peeked her head inside, clearly having been waiting anxiously somewhere nearby for news. "Is Claire in trouble?" "No, little bird," Damien said, his expression softening instantly at the sight of his daughter. "Claire did nothing wrong. Everything has been resolved." Lily rushed across the room and threw her arms around my waist, nearly knocking me from the chair. "I knew you didn't do it." "I told everyone." "You did," I said, hugging her back, feeling tears prick at my eyes for an entirely different reason now. "Thank you for believing in me." Damien watched the exchange with an expression I could not quite name, something warm and thoughtful passing behind his gray eyes. When Lily finally released me and skipped off toward the kitchen to inform Mrs. Whitfield of the good news, he remained standing near me, closer than strictly necessary. "I meant what I said," he told me quietly, "about making certain you have nothing to fear in this house. And I intend to be far more present going forward, rather than leaving you and Lily unprotected while I attend to business elsewhere." "You don't need to change your schedule on my account," I said, though something in his tone made my pulse quicken in a way I could not entirely blame on the day's stress. "I'm not doing it entirely on your account," he said, a faint, almost boyish smile crossing his usually guarded features. "Though I will admit, the thought of returning to a house where you might be endangered again is not one I intend to entertain." I did not know how to respond to that, so I simply nodded, my cheeks warming under the weight of his attention. He walked me to the door of the study, and for one brief moment, his hand brushed against mine, sending a jolt of awareness through my entire body that I quickly attributed to the exhausting events of the day, even though some part of me suspected it was something else entirely. That night, as I finally lay down in my own bed, safe and exonerated, I thought about Vanessa's parting words, the venom in her voice as she promised this was not over. I thought about the way Damien had looked at me in the study, the warmth beneath his careful control. And I thought about the strange, terrifying realization settling over me that whatever Vanessa Hale had accused me of trying to steal, I was beginning to want it for real, dangerous as that wanting might be. Mrs. Whitfield knocked softly on my door before retiring for the night, a tray with warm tea balanced in her hands. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly, setting the tray on my small table. "I should have trusted you more firmly from the start, rather than allowing doubt to creep in during the search." "You were only doing what the situation demanded," I told her, accepting the tea gratefully. "I don't hold it against you. You're kinder than most people would be, after a day like today." She lingered by the door a moment longer. "For what it's worth, I've worked in this house a long time, through difficult years, and worse company than Miss Hale. I haven't seen Mr. Cross defend anyone the way he defended you tonight," not once. I turned that thought over, long after she left, sipping the tea slowly, letting its warmth settle the last of the day's tremors from my hands. Outside my window, the courtyard was dark and quiet. The storm of the day finally passed. But somewhere out there, I knew, Vanessa was already plotting her next move, and I had no way of knowing just how far she was willing to go to reclaim what she believed was rightfully hers. 3 weeks passed, and the house felt different without Vanessa's presence haunting every hallway. Damien kept his promise. He canceled 2 business trips that would have taken him away for extended periods, delegating what he could to his most trusted associates, and spent his evenings at home in a way that Mrs. Whitfield told me had not happened since Lily was an infant. Even the household staff seemed lighter, as though a shadow had lifted from every corner of the mansion. Mrs. Whitfield hummed softly while arranging flowers in the hallway, and the guards who once eyed me with cautious suspicion now offered friendly nods whenever I passed. I found myself falling into an easy rhythm with the family, one that felt startlingly natural, given how tense my first weeks in the house had been. Mornings meant breakfast with Lily in the sunlit kitchen, often joined by Damien, before he disappeared into his study for calls I was never meant to overhear. Afternoons were spent in the garden or the nursery, and increasingly, evenings found the 3 of us together, sharing dinner at a table that no longer felt cold and formal. "Tell me a story," Lily demanded one evening after dinner, curled between us on the large sofa in the sitting room, a fire crackling in the hearth despite the mild weather outside. "What kind of story?" I asked, running my fingers gently through her hair. "A brave one, with a hero who saves everyone." Damien, seated on Lily's other side with a book he had abandoned reading the moment his daughter began speaking, glanced at me with a faint smile. "I believe you're better suited for this particular request than I am." I laughed softly, and began weaving a tale of a clever girl who outsmarted a dragon not with swords but with kindness, watching Lily's eyes grow heavy as the story progressed. By the time I finished, she had drifted to sleep between us, her small hand still clutching a fold of my sleeve. "You're remarkable with her," Damien said quietly, careful not to wake his daughter. "I've never seen her settle so completely with anyone, myself included, on some nights." "She's remarkable herself," I said. "She makes it easy." "I don't think that's entirely true." His eyes met mine over Lily's sleeping form, steady and searching in a way that made my heart stutter. "I think you have a gift for making people feel safe. It's rare, and it's precious, and I find myself grateful every day that you walked into this house." The warmth in his voice sent heat rushing to my cheeks, and I busied myself with adjusting the blanket over Lily's shoulders to avoid meeting his gaze directly. "I'm just doing my job." "Are you?" he asked, his voice low. "Because it doesn't feel like just a job, watching the 2 of you together. It hasn't felt that way for some time now, if I'm being honest with myself." I risked a glance up at him then, and the intensity in his expression stole the breath from my lungs. There was nothing guarded about him in that moment, none of the careful control he wore like armor in every other aspect of his life. Just quiet honesty, and something that looked remarkably like hope. "Damien," I started, unsure of what I even intended to say next. "You don't have to say anything," he said gently, seeming to sense my uncertainty. "I only wanted you to know how I feel, in case I've been too careful to say it plainly before now. I care for you, Claire. Not simply as someone who cares wonderfully for my daughter, but as a woman, I find myself thinking about far more than I probably should." Before I could respond, Lily stirred slightly between us, murmuring something in her sleep, and the moment shifted, gentler but no less charged. Damien carefully lifted his daughter into his arms, and I followed him up the stairs to tuck her into bed, my mind spinning with everything he had just admitted. After Lily was settled, we lingered in the hallway outside her room, neither of us quite ready to end the evening. "I should let you rest," Damien said, though he made no move to leave. "I don't want you to," I admitted quietly, surprising myself with my own honesty. Something shifted in his expression, and he stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool hallway. "Claire, I need to be honest with you about something, before this goes any further. The life I lead is complicated. Dangerous, at times, People fear my name for reasons that aren't entirely undeserved. If you choose to let me in, truly let me in, you need to understand exactly what that means. I've heard the whispers, I said. I've seen the way people look at you, the way your men move around you like they're expecting trouble at any moment. And it doesn't frighten you away? I considered the question honestly before answering. It worries me, but it doesn't frighten me away. I've watched you with your daughter for weeks now, Damien. I've seen the man beneath whatever reputation follows you outside these walls. That's the man I'm interested in. His hand rose slowly, giving me every opportunity to step back if I wished, before gently brushing a strand of hair from my face. I would do everything in my power to keep you safe, both of you, if you'll let me. Both of us? You and Lily, he said. She already considers you family, whether either of us intended that or not. I find myself wanting the same thing, wanting you here, permanently, as something far more significant than an employee. The confession hung between us, fragile and enormous all at once. I thought about my life before arriving at this mansion, the loneliness of moving between temporary positions with no roots anywhere, no family of my own to return to. And I thought about the past weeks, watching Lily's face light up every morning, feeling something warm and unfamiliar bloom in my chest every time Damien looked at me the way he was looking at me now. I want that too, I whispered. He closed the remaining distance between us slowly, giving me time to change my mind, and when I did not, his lips met mine in a kiss that was gentle at first, careful, as though he feared I might disappear if he moved too quickly. I melted into it, months of careful restraint finally dissolving, my hands finding the front of his shirt as his arms wrapped around me, pulling me closer. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, a smile crossed his face that I had never seen before, unguarded and genuinely happy. I've wanted to do that for far longer than I probably should admit, he said. Since when? I asked, curious despite myself. Since the garden party, if I'm being completely honest. Watching you handle Vanessa's cruelty with such quiet dignity, watching my daughter cling to your hand like you were the safest person in the world, I think some part of me knew then that you were different from anyone I had let close to this family before. What about Lily? I asked, glancing toward her closed bedroom door. How do we tell her, if this becomes something real? I don't want her to feel confused, or worry that things will change too quickly. I think, Damien said slowly, that Lily already sees what we're only now admitting to each other. Children notice far more than we give them credit for, but we'll go slowly, for her sake as much as our own. There's no need to rush something that finally feels right. I appreciated the care in his answer, the way he considered his daughter's heart even in the middle of his own excitement. It was one more reason, among many gathering quietly inside me, that made this entire situation feel less like a risk and more like something inevitable. We stood together in the hallway for a long while, simply talking, learning small details about each other that our careful professional distance had never allowed before. He told me about his own childhood, harder and colder than I had imagined, about the weight of responsibility that had settled on his shoulders far too young. I told him about my parents, gone now for several years, and the winding path that had led me to nannying, as both a profession and, in some strange way, a search for the family stability I had lost. It felt, that night, like the beginning of something real and lasting, something that had nothing to do with Vanessa's cruel predictions about men like him never choosing women like me. But peace, I had already learned in my short time within these walls, never lasted long in the Cross household. The message arrived 3 days later, slipped beneath my bedroom door sometime during the night. I found it in the morning, a plain envelope with no return address, my hands trembling slightly as I opened it. Inside was a single photograph, printed on plain paper, showing myself and Damien in the hallway outside Lily's room, caught in the exact moment of our kiss 3 nights prior. Beneath it, a short, typed message that made my blood run cold. Enjoy him while it lasts. Everyone who gets close to Damien Cross ends up broken, one way or another. I should know. I'll make certain you learn that lesson too. There was no signature, but I did not need one to know exactly who had sent it. Vanessa had not simply disappeared after being cast out of the house. She had been watching, waiting, and now she was making certain I understood that whatever peace we had found together would not go unchallenged. I brought the note directly to Damien's study, my hands still shaking as I placed it on his desk. His expression darkened as he read it, his jaw tightening with barely controlled fury. "She's been watching this house," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Which means either someone on the inside is feeding her information, or she's found a way to observe us directly." "What do we do?" I asked, fear coiling tight in my stomach. "We find out exactly how far she's willing to go," Damien said, already reaching for his phone to summon his security team. "And we make certain that she understands, once and for all, that threatening you or my daughter will not be tolerated under any circumstances." I watched him transform in front of me, the warm, careful man from 3 nights ago giving way to someone harder, more calculating, the version of himself that had built and maintained his position in a dangerous world. It should have frightened me, perhaps, but instead, I felt something closer to relief, knowing that this formidable, protective energy was now aimed entirely at keeping myself and Lily safe from whatever Vanessa was planning next. That night, after the guards had taken their new positions, and the house had finally settled into an uneasy quiet, Damien found me in the kitchen, unable to sleep, staring at a cup of tea gone cold in my hands. "You should rest," he said gently, taking the seat across from me. "I keep thinking about what she wrote. Everyone who gets close to you ends up broken. What if she's not entirely wrong to warn me?" "She's wrong," Damien said firmly, reaching across the table to take my hand. "Vanessa broke herself long before I ever met her, through her own choices, her own cruelty. I refuse to let her convince you that loving me means accepting harm as inevitable. I will not allow that to happen to you, or to Lily. I promise you that." I wanted desperately to believe him, and looking into his steady gray eyes, I found that I did. Whatever came next, I understood clearly now that I was no longer facing it alone. Security cameras were installed around the perimeter of the mansion within hours, and 2 additional guards took up positions near the garden gates by nightfall. Damien barely left my side for the following 2 days, his phone constantly buzzing with updates from his team as they traced the source of the photograph. It was Mrs. Whitfield who finally uncovered the truth, her sharp eyes noticing that one of the newer kitchen staff members, a young woman named Grace who had been hired only weeks before my arrival, had been unusually curious about the household's daily routines. "She's been asking too many questions," Mrs. Whitfield told Damien during a tense meeting in the study, myself seated beside him, Lily thankfully occupied with an activity in the nursery, under the watchful eye of one of the guards. "Where Claire's room is located, what time you typically return home, whether the 2 of you have been spending more time together lately. I thought nothing of it at first, simple gossip among staff. Now I'm not so certain." Damien's expression turned grim. "Bring her in." Grace arrived pale and visibly frightened, twisting her apron between nervous fingers as she stood before Damien's desk. It did not take long, under his steady and unrelenting questioning, for the full truth to emerge. Vanessa had approached her weeks earlier, offering a substantial sum of money in exchange for information about the household, promising far more once the staff position provided a genuine opportunity to cause real damage. "She said she just wanted to know what was happening in the house," Grace said, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know she meant to hurt anyone. I swear I didn't know." "You took a photograph and passed it to a woman who has already tried to have an innocent person framed for theft," Damien said, his voice cold enough to make the young woman flinch visibly. "Whatever you believed her intentions were, you facilitated real harm." Grace was dismissed from the household immediately, though Damien, to my surprise, chose not to pursue further consequences against her, recognizing perhaps that she had been more foolish than malicious. But the information she provided, under careful questioning, gave his security team exactly what they needed to locate Vanessa's current residence and begin monitoring her movements. "She's planning something bigger," Damien told me that evening, pacing the length of his study while I sat curled in one of the armchairs, exhaustion and worry etched into every line of my body. The photograph was a warning, a way of letting us know she's still watching. But Vanessa doesn't simply warn people. She acts. "What do you think she'll do?" "I don't know," he admitted, running a hand through his dark hair. a rare gesture of visible frustration from a man who usually kept himself so carefully composed. But I intend to make certain she never gets close enough to hurt either of you. In the meantime, Damien arranged for a private tutor to visit twice a week, teaching Lily and myself basic self-defense techniques disguised as playful games, insisting that both of us understand at least the fundamentals of protecting ourselves should the need ever arise. Lily approached the lessons with the same fearless enthusiasm she brought to everything else, while I found myself surprised by how quickly the movements began to feel natural, my body remembering patterns my mind had only just learned. "You're a fast learner," the tutor remarked one afternoon, watching me correctly block a slow, practiced strike. "Most people take months to move that confidently." "I have good reason to learn quickly," I said, thinking of the photograph still locked away in Damien's desk drawer, a constant reminder of how close danger could creep without warning. The opportunity for Vanessa to act came sooner than either of us expected. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, nearly a week after the photograph arrived, during what should have been a simple outing to the park with Lily. Damien had insisted on accompanying us himself, along with 2 of his security personnel maintaining a discreet distance, but even that precaution nearly wasn't enough. Lily was playing on the swings, laughing brightly as Damien pushed her, when I noticed a woman approaching from across the park, dressed casually enough to blend into the crowd of other parents and children, but there was something familiar about her posture, her deliberate stride. My blood ran cold as Vanessa's face came into clear view beneath a wide-brimmed hat she had clearly worn to disguise herself. "Damien," I said urgently, catching his attention immediately. He followed my gaze, and his entire body tensed. "Take Lily and move toward the security car, now." I scooped Lily off the swing despite her protests, hurrying her toward the parked vehicle where one of the guards waited, while Damien moved to intercept Vanessa before she could get any closer to us. I could not hear their conversation from that distance, but I watched the confrontation unfold, Vanessa's expressive gestures growing increasingly agitated, Damien's posture remaining rigid and unyielding throughout. Then, suddenly, Vanessa's hand moved toward the bag slung over her shoulder, and everything happened at once. The nearest security guard moved swiftly, closing the distance between himself and Vanessa in seconds, restraining her arm before whatever she had reached for could be retrieved. Vanessa screamed, a sound of pure fury and desperation, struggling against the guard's grip as other park visitors began to notice the commotion, pulling out phones, some ushering their own children away from the scene. "Let me go!" Vanessa shrieked. "This is my life too. He was supposed to be mine." Damien stepped closer, his expression carved from stone. "You were given every opportunity to leave this peacefully, Vanessa. I warned you what would happen if you continued down this path." "You ruined me," she spat, tears streaming down her face now, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. "Do you understand what it means to lose everything I spent years building? The connections, the reputation, all of it gone because you chose some nanny, over everything we could have had together." "You destroyed it yourself," Damien said, his voice hard but controlled. "Every choice that led us to this moment was yours. The lies, the manipulation, the attempted framing of an innocent woman. I gave you every chance to walk away with dignity, and you chose this instead." The bag, once the guard finally pried it open under Damien's instruction, revealed nothing more dangerous than a small folder of documents, apparently intended as some form of leverage or blackmail material, rather than a weapon, though the moment of uncertainty had been terrifying enough regardless. Local authorities arrived shortly after, summoned by Damien's own security team, and Vanessa was taken into custody, her earlier confrontation in a public place, combined with the previous framing incident, finally providing enough grounds for genuine legal consequences. As she was led away, still shouting accusations that grew increasingly incoherent, I finally allowed myself to exhale, Lily's small hand tight in mine, as we watched from a safe distance. "Is it over?" Lily asked quietly, looking between myself and her father with wide, worried eyes. Damien knelt down to her level, his expression softening instantly despite the tension still radiating from his frame. "It's over, little bird. She won't be able to hurt anyone in our family again." Our family. The words settled over me like warm sunlight, and I saw Damien's eyes flicker toward me as he said them, as though testing how they felt spoken aloud for the first time. The following weeks passed with a peace that felt almost unfamiliar after everything we had endured. Vanessa faced formal charges related to the framing attempt and the public confrontation, and though her family's influence managed to reduce the severity of her eventual consequences, she was barred from any further contact with our household, a restriction enforced with the full weight of Damien's resources and legal team. In the days immediately following the incident at the park, I found myself replaying the moment again and again, the sight of Vanessa's hand reaching toward her bag, the sharp fear that had gripped me before I understood the true nature of the danger. Damien noticed the way I flinched at unexpected sounds, the way I kept Lily closer than usual during our walks through the garden. "It will fade," he told me one evening, holding me close as I finally allowed the delayed shock of the confrontation to surface in quiet tears. "The fear doesn't disappear all at once, but it does fade, given time and safety. I intend to give you both as much of that as I possibly can." He kept his word in every visible way, arranging for the additional security to remain in place long after any reasonable threat had passed, simply so that I might feel completely safe within the walls of our home. Slowly, over the following weeks, the tension began to ease from my shoulders, replaced by a steadiness I had not felt in longer than I could remember. Life in the mansion transformed in her absence. The tension that had once filled every hallway dissolved, replaced by genuine warmth and laughter. Mrs. Whitfield began humming while she worked in the kitchen again, something she confided she hadn't done freely in over a year. Lily thrived, no longer watching every adult interaction with the guarded wariness that had characterized her earlier behavior, now simply a happy, secure child, surrounded by people who loved her. And Damien, freed from the constant undercurrent of Vanessa's jealousy and manipulation, revealed himself more fully with each passing week. A man of quiet humor and deep loyalty beneath the formidable reputation that still followed him through the world beyond our walls. Mrs. Whitfield began treating me less like staff and more like family with each passing week, teaching me small recipes that had apparently been favorites in the household for years, and confiding stories about Damien's own childhood that painted a fuller picture of the guarded man I had come to love. Lily, meanwhile, had taken to introducing me to her small circle of friends at school, not as her nanny, but simply as Claire, a small shift in language that meant more to me than she likely realized. Even Damien's associates, the quiet, watchful men who moved through the mansion on business I rarely asked about, had grown warmer in their interactions with me, nodding respectfully whenever we crossed paths, occasionally offering small kindnesses that suggested word had spread of how thoroughly their employer had committed himself to protecting our small family. It was nearly 3 months after that confrontation in the park, when Damien asked me to join him in the garden one evening, after Lily had been settled into bed. The same oak tree where we had shared our first honest conversation stood illuminated by soft string lights that had not been there that afternoon, and I realized, with growing wonder, that he had arranged all of this deliberately. "I've been thinking about something for quite some time now," he said, taking both of my hands in his beneath the gentle glow of the lights. "About what it means to build something real, something lasting, after everything this family has endured." My heart began to race, understanding beginning to dawn even before he lowered himself onto one knee before me, producing a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "Claire, from the moment you walked into this house, you brought a warmth into our lives that I had forgotten was possible. You've loved my daughter as though she were your own, weathered cruelty and danger, with more grace than anyone should have to display, and shown me that trust, real trust, is worth every risk it demands. I love you, completely and without reservation, and I would consider it the greatest honor of my life if you would agree to be my wife." Tears filled my eyes as I nodded, unable to form words for several long moments, before finally managing a whispered yes that felt like the truest thing I had ever said. He slipped the ring onto my finger and rose to pull me into an embrace, and somewhere above us, I caught sight of a small figure watching from an upstairs window, unable to sleep apparently, and delighted at the scene unfolding in the garden below. Lily burst out of the house moments later in her pajamas, having clearly been eavesdropping through her bedroom window the entire time, throwing herself into our embrace with an enthusiasm that made both Damien and myself laugh through our own emotional tears. "Does this mean you're really going to be my mom now?" she asked, looking up at me with hopeful eyes that had once been so guarded and were now completely open. "If that's what you want," I said softly, kneeling down to her level. "I've wanted that since the very first day," Lily said simply, wrapping her small arms around my neck. Standing in that garden, surrounded by the family I had never expected to find, I thought back to my first terrified days in this house, to Vanessa's cruel words about women like me never belonging in a world like this. She had been wrong, completely and thoroughly wrong. I had not been consumed or discarded by this world, as she had promised. I had been protected, cherished, and ultimately welcomed into it as something far more permanent than she had ever managed to become herself. The wedding took place 6 months later, a smaller and more intimate affair than the grand society events Vanessa had always favored, held in this very garden, beneath the same oak tree where Damien had first shown me the man beneath his careful armor. Lily served as our flower girl, beaming with pride throughout the entire ceremony, and Mrs. Whitfield cried openly from her seat in the front row. As I stood beside Damien, exchanging vows beneath the setting sun, I understood fully that the humiliation and fear of those early weeks had led, ultimately, to something far greater than I had ever imagined possible. I was no longer the overlooked nanny that Vanessa had once tried so hard to diminish. I was Claire Cross now, wife to a man who had chosen honesty and loyalty over convenience, mother in every sense that mattered to a little girl who had waited so patiently for someone to stay, and finally, completely, exactly where I belonged. Later that night, after the guests had departed and Lily had finally fallen asleep in her own bed, exhausted from dancing and cake, Damien and I stood together beneath the same oak tree one last time, the string lights still glowing softly above us. "No regrets?" he asked quietly, pulling me close against his chest. "None," I said, resting my head against him, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Not one single regret. Only gratitude for every difficult step that led us here." He pressed a kiss to the top of my head, and we stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge over the garden that had witnessed the beginning, the danger, and finally, the happy ending of everything we had built together. Whatever challenges the future might bring, I knew now, without any doubt, that we would face them exactly as we had faced Vanessa's cruelty and jealousy from the very start, together, unshaken, and entirely unwilling to let anyone tear apart what we had fought so hard to protect.